Okay. Like I said, I'm super awkward, so
Just be a lot of like silence and like awkward laughter.
exactly. Okay, so I don't even know how to start, but welcome to the Nobody podcast. My name is Abisai, and you are
Jenny.
Jenny. Pleasure. Yeah. It's gonna be super awkward. I know it is.
Like we'll power through. We'll be good.
Exactly. But tell me a little bit about yourself. The whole premises behind this, I want it to be like a conversation. I don't want you to feel like it's an interview. That's why I didn't bring like 20 questions to ask you, because to me those aren't the type of conversations I like listening to, nor it's something that I'm comfortable doing, because I'm not one to interview. So I just like to have a conversation. I'll ask you some stuff and then we'll go on from there. But the whole point is to talk about like your aspirations, like your dreams, like what do you want to do, your obstacles, like your failures, your successes, and things like that. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Let's start there.
I was actually born in San Antonio, so haven't gone that far.
Okay, no way. Okay, how old are you?
I'm 28.
28. Okay, being 28, did you picture yourself being in San Antonio still?
I mean, my dream has always been to kind of stay where my family is, but to travel a lot. So that's something that, I mean, it's been a little more difficult this year, but it's something I plan to do more in the future.
Okay.
But I really want to stay kind of close to my family, and most of them's here in San Antonio.
Okay. How many siblings do you have? When you say family, what's considered your family? Like.
Oh, like aunts, uncles, cousins. Like I have a huge family.
Really?
Yeah. Like
they all live here in San Antonio?
Most of them?
Most
of
no
them.
way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then there's some in like Fredericksburg, and then my oldest sister's in Virginia.
Okay.
And then my aunt's in Colorado, but for the most part they're in San Antonio, or like
a
few
few
hours drive. Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
I have my sister Brandy, my sister Becky, and my sister Mandy. So 3.
Oh, 3 girls.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So San Antonio. Have you traveled anywhere else? You said you wanted to travel.
Yeah, I do want to travel more. So far, I haven't really been outside of the United States.
Okay.
So that's definitely something I want to do in the near future. But I've kind of been a little bit around the U.S. Like, I've been on a few road trips to like, I went through to Oklahoma, and then I visited my sister in Virginia. So I've been a few places, but not as much as I'd like.
What do you think what's been your biggest obstacle in not traveling a little bit more before COVID?
Just me not making it a priority like I should have.
Okay.
I just tend to focus on other things or let myself get distracted instead of making a plan to actually go do things.
Interesting. Okay.
So
So if you could pick anywhere right now, where would you travel to? Let's say in the United States and also outside of the United States.
I'm like, in the United States, I kind of want to go to California, which shouldn't be, that difficult.
You've never been?
Like, no, I haven't.
Really? Okay. What part?
Have you?
Yes.
Well, I don't have a specific part.
You
Like,
just wanna
I just want to
The
go.
West Coast.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Outside of the United States?
Outside, I'd really like to go to Germany, just because I have some people that have gone, and I hear it's really beautiful. So I just think it'd be cool to visit, or Japan.
Japan. Okay.
Yeah.
That really intrigues me.
Yeah.
Japan. Super interesting. Okay.
I have a friend who lives there, and he's like, yeah, like anytime you come, like, whoever you're with, you just stay at my place. And I'm
Really?
like, yeah, and I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
oh, that's cool, but I'm like, I just never done it.
When it comes to your dreams, like what do you aspire? Like what is something that you want to do? Like something that you've always wanted to do. Like what is your dream?
Well, I mean, I feel like my dream's pretty easygoing. I just want to be able to travel more and still do what I love, photography. So
Okay.
ideally, I'd like to do more like elopements or more creative portraits where I get to go to like faraway places
Okay.
and do something super cool. Like
You said elopements?
elopements, yeah.
I do not know what that is. So do you mind
Oh,
explaining it?
like weddings, when you have like a small intimate wedding of like one or two people, sometimes they'll do like destination elopements
No
and
way.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Have you ever done any?
I've done some elopements, but I haven't done any that are like I've gotten to really go travel or go out and do.
Gotcha. Why that? Like I've never heard of that before. I
No?
think I might have seen like some pictures, but like where they're like somewhere exotic and they're like,
Yeah, and it's just like one or two
yes.
people, and like it's I don't know. I like elopements because they're a little more like intimate, it's a little more
Okay.
personal. Like you really get to know the bride and groom, and like you know their whoever few people they bring with them, and then I don't know. It's just so beautiful because you're going somewhere that you wouldn't be able to go with like a huge wedding guest list.
I
Like
see.
it's just I don't know. I think it's cool.
So you said you've already done like several, right? Might have not been like super exotic, but you've already experienced it.
Yeah, I've done a few.
So tell me a little bit more about that process. So is it just because I know whenever I go and like book a shoot, it might be spontaneous, like there's no planning whatsoever. Where I'm like, we pick a spot and we just go out there and shoot. I'm sure that has to be way different. Like,
Yeah, it definitely has a few more steps to it.
okay,
But I mean, the few that I've done have been around San Antonio,
okay,
so it hasn't been like I have to get travel or anything for it.
okay,
But I mean, it's not too far outside like the normal process, by just kind of getting to know them a little better, knowing why they chose a location. Sometimes like the location itself is important. It's like where he proposed or where they first met or where
interesting.
they've always wanted to go together. Like, so it's just kind of cool. And I mean, I guess it's not too much different, but
So does the planning revolve? So do you like go out with them like to lunch or like how does the planning go? Is it over just messages? Like how? What's your best way to get like to getting more information? For me, like you could. For me personally, it's I could do so much over text. You know what I mean? I
yeah,
prefer like, especially if it's gonna be something like super intimate like that. I prefer like sitting down with.
getting to meet them face to face. Yeah,
Exactly.
I definitely like to do that beforehand, and really getting to know them as people. Like aside from just the shoot they're doing, get to know them as like what interests them, what inspires them,
Okay.
like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I usually like meet up beforehand, and then we'll kind of communicate through email. And then occasionally, depending on the situation, I might meet up with them once more before the elopement,
Okay.
just to get like the final details down, making sure like exactly where they're gonna be and like all the other parties that are gonna be involved.
Interesting. Okay.
But
What's something? What's been what stopped you? I mean, besides COVID, from booking more elopements, doing more photo shoots. What's your biggest obstacle whenever it comes to taking portraits?
I mean, in the past, I feel like my biggest obstacle has been myself. I tend to get a little anxious sometimes, or I always have this fear that I'm not good enough,
Okay.
and because of that, I tend to not put myself out there as much.
Okay.
But I've kind of changed that mindset a little bit this year, realizing that like I am good enough. I've put a lot of effort into this. It's something I love to do, and that the worst case scenario is I'm not the right fit for a client, or they're not quite the right fit for me, and we go our separate ways. But I'm just once I get out of my own way, I feel like it's a lot easier.
You said that transition happened this year. What caused it? What made you finally realize? You know what? What made you finally have that mentality?
I think I was just kind of the way my life has kind of, I don't know how to say it, but just the way things have kind of worked out, where I used to, like, when I was younger, live very paycheck to paycheck. Like I didn't
Okay.
really have extra to focus on other things.
Okay.
And I didn't quite put myself as a priority, or the things that, like my business, the things that I'm passionate about, as a priority. And because of that, it kind of held me back. I didn't really get to do much with it, or as much as I would have liked. But this year, it kind of freed up a little bit, and just with me believing in myself, I'm getting more clients that want to come book with me and that are happy with the services I provide, and I don't know, it just feels a lot better.
Do you go looking for them, or is it more like by word of mouth, or like people see your work, or like how are you booking these clients now
Yeah, it's
compared to the
mostly,
past?
yeah, it's mostly word of mouth.
Okay.
As of now, I do have, of course, my different, social media outlets that I use, and I'll kind of contact people through there occasionally. But mostly it's kind of putting my work in a way that they see it and they want to reach out to me.
Okay.
So,
And how do you do that?
um, just through, again, through social media.
Okay.
And just trying to, I do have a marketing degree, so trying to actually use it a little bit more, and be more intelligent with how I'm setting my layouts and the way that I'm writing to be, I don't know, just more interesting, more alluring.
How long have you been taking photos?
Um,
Before getting paid and after getting paid. So just in general.
so just in general. Before getting paid, so I started taking photos, just kind of as a hobby in high school.
Okay.
And
Was
then
it like an elective, or you just picked up a camera and just started shooting?
So it's actually kind of a weird story, but I originally started out on the newspaper team, at my
Oh,
school,
interesting. Okay.
and we didn't have a photographer. So they're like, "Oh, Jenny, like, good luck with this. Like, enjoy." And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this." So, but I just through trial and error, kind of like figured out how to work a camera.
So they
and,
never taught you anything. You-
not really. Like they kind of gave over the basics, but
Okay.
like there was never like, oh, this is what the aperture does, or like this is what this button does. It
Gotcha.
was like, figure it out.
So did you figure it out by watching videos, or by just shooting and just messing with the camera?
Definitely both. So some of it was just trial and error, just kind of
Okay.
figuring it out and kind of guesswork. And then YouTube helps a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so kind of finding different artists that like I like the way their style came out, and I'm like, oh well, like how are they achieving this look? Like what are they doing? And then kind of learning from there. But I still was a little more for writing versus photography. But then there was it's like a competition they had, and they were like, okay, well, like you're gonna be in this competition, and I'm like, I don't think I should be in this competition. Like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I kind of like taught myself, and it's not like it wasn't quality work. Like,
Okay.
but I did it, and I actually ended up doing pretty well in it.
Congrats.
And then, and then,
Do you remember what it was?
it's Taj, so it's actually a pretty big competition, but I ended up being in like the top 10% or whatever it is, which I mean, there's a lot of people that entered it, but like it was still kind of cool, like considering like I don't really know what I'm doing. Like I entered like 6 photos and like they did well. So
Well, do you remember what kind of photos they were that you took?
I don't remember all of them. I remember like they had like different prompts. Like one was textures, and I took a picture of like the trunk of like a palm tree, but
Okay.
like from a different, like from like upside down, like I don't know, just like weird stuff.
Gotcha.
But, and then one of them was like people. So there was like an event going on where for some reason there were a bunch of like clowns downtown,
Interesting.
and so I just took
So-
some photos of clowns and like called it a day. But I mean, it ended up being pretty fun, and then like I did well in it, which made me like feel good about myself. And
Okay.
I tend to be a little shy, especially as a kid, so it was kind of nice to find something that like I can kind of be around people, but also like do my own thing.
Have you always done portraits, or have you shot like random stuff, like the tree trunk and stuff like that?
Yeah, when I first started out, it was actually a lot of like wildlife. I used to live on a little property in Adkins that had just like a bunch of like, like squirrels, like
Oh, interesting.
bunnies. Like we had goats and chickens, so it's just
So you had your own zoo farm.
yeah, basically.
Gotcha.
And then just taking photos of cats. So it really started out with like animals and like nature. But then as I got more comfortable with it, I was able to like shoot with some people, and I realized like, oh, this is kind of awesome, and it's kind of cool. Like I love that feeling when you show someone a photo and they're like, wait, that's me, like,
Yeah.
and then they feel all good. I'm like, well,
Thank
geez,
you.
now we both feel good. Like it's a win-win. So I learned that I really like enjoy doing that, and so I kind of went in that direction. But of course, I still love nature. Like it's everywhere in my photos. So.
Do you remember your first person you ever shot?
I think it was my friend Ashley, but she's one of those people that's really like go with the flow. So
Okay.
like I kind of used her as my guinea pig for a lot of things. But and of course, like starting out, like it wasn't top-notch work, but
Of
like
course.
it was fun, and like she got to like she aspired to be a model at the time, so it was cool for her to like learn different posing, and while I'm learning the technical side of it, and
Interesting.
so it's pretty cool.
And after doing all of that, what made you finally start charging? How long how long did you do free photos? Let me put it that way.
Um, for
And do you still do free photos?
I don't do free photos anymore. I do occasionally do model trades with like certain signed models or things like that, where I can kind of benefit both of us. But I tend to stay away from doing like completely free work. Just because I do kind of need to run a business.
course.
Like it's fun to do, but it's also like my livelihood. Um, and as far as when I first started charging, it was maybe like 5 years ago or
Okay.
so. So like I was a lot of like me learning, getting comfortable behind it, getting comfortable shooting with people, and making sure I really knew what I was doing before I went out and was like, okay, pay me for this.
Did you initiate the conversation when it came to paying, or was it just an agreement you came upon?
It was more or less an agreement we
Okay.
came upon. Like I don't remember exactly the scenario.
course.
It's been so long now, but just something where it wasn't something that I sought someone out for and they sought me out for. And I do kind of think it's a little different. Like if I'm reaching out to you to do a specific shoot, like
Gotcha.
I'm not going to be like, okay, this is a specific shoot I want, but also you pay me. Like that's a little weird.
Exactly.
But like if it's a concept you come to me with, and it's not maybe necessarily like something I would have thought of right off the bat, like it's more geared towards what they're looking for. But I think that's kind of how it started. And then they offered to pay, and then we kind of worked out an agreement from there.
Interesting. The reason why I say that is because a lot of people as photographers have a really hard time charging.
Yes.
And it's such a and it's such a hard and awkward moment whenever you're like, oh, I'm gonna charge, or it's just, as a photographer, it's super. Again, you're just full of insecurities. Your work might be good, and it is good,
But you always
but
have that like imposter syndrome where you're like, am I really a business? But like you're like, no, you are. Like
exactly.
you have to act like you are.
Exactly, and it's just so hard. It's, you doubt yourself. Like people think it's good, but you're like, oh, it's not good enough, so I'm just gonna do it for free, and then you just spend all of this time just shooting for free. I mean, there's nothing wrong with shooting for free, but at the end of the day, you have to make a living. At the end of the day, you also have to look after yourself and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
If your camera breaks, no one's gonna say, you know what, I'm gonna give you $1,000 to fix or to buy a new one. And
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that we take for granted. It's so easy for someone someone that isn't a photographer to say, you know what, just take a picture of me. It's not that big of a deal. But they don't really understand how much an equipment really costs, like how much the body of a camera is, how much the lens really is, how much gas you have to go drive to a certain location, like after the work process. I think we really take it for granted. Photographer puts a lot, and I mean a lot, of work, not only preparing to make sure that all my stuff is there. I have a camera, I have a lens, making sure it works, then going to the location, then taking a couple hours to shoot that, and then going home and then processing, like just looking at the photos and looking through all of that, and then start editing like one by one, and then like sending all of that. It's not just I show up, take pictures, and that's where it ends. So
yeah, it's not like a click of the button and it's done. And I also think people tend to forget like how much time goes into learning your craft as well. Like they're like, oh, it's just you just show up and you do it. And I'm like, no, I spent like 10 years learning
course.
how to do this in the way that I'm doing it.
of course.
So
I think because of filters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just slap a filter
yeah,
in
they're
it.
like, yeah, just one and done. And I'm like, that's not how you achieve this specific look though. Like it's different.
Exactly, but that, I guess they also don't realize all the work the photographer did to create that filter.
Yeah.
It wasn't he he just said, you know what, I'm gonna create a filter, and he just made the filter. The photographer had years of experience of messing around with different colors and to get the colors exactly how he wanted to make that filter. And um, what's your opinion whenever you take photos? Like, how do you do your process? Like, whenever it comes to work, and like, what what what's your process after you finish taking photos?
Well, after I take the photos, I'll usually take them back home, and then of course you have to download them all, and then I'll kind of cull through them to see the best images.
Okay.
Typically, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and edit the amount in their package of my personal favorites, so the ones I
Okay.
think they would enjoy more based off of what they said they were looking for, that kind of thing. And then I tend to also under promise and over deliver. So usually,
Love
if
it.
I say your package comes with 5 to 7 images, you're usually getting closer to like 10 to 15. Like,
Perfect.
it's just kind of how I roll. But also recently, I've started doing some proof packages as well, where people kind of want to look and choose the images themselves.
Okay. Interesting.
Uh,
What made you go that route?
So I've just had a lot of people requesting, like, they're excited to see their images. They want to know what it's like, but at the same time, I don't like showing unfinished work. Um, so when I do proofs, I'll kind of lightly edit, and instead of showing them like all of the images, I'll show them like 30 images that are lightly edited, and then they kind of choose which ones are their favorite.
Interesting. Okay.
Or if they want to buy additional images, they'll be like, oh my goodness, I love, like these 5 or whatever, and then I'll do those additional edits for them as well. So they're getting more of what they love, and it's a little more than their package. But some people up front, not knowing what the session's going to be like, they get a little nervous that, like, okay, well, maybe there's not going to be that many good ones.
Of course.
And then when they actually see them, they're like, oh no, like, I love that. That's awesome. I look dope. And then they want to get more. So I now have it to where they have the option to see more, and if they like them, to choose more.
What's been your the biggest lesson you have learned whenever taking photos? Because a lot of people, just like, if I was to go to a makeup artist, I'm like, you're just putting on makeup. It's not that big of a deal until they actually hand you a palette, and it's like, okay, well, recreate
well,
this
then do it.
exactly.
You're like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm sorry. What was the question?
What is what is something you like, one of the biggest obstacles you've had to overcome? That might have not even been the question, but I totally blanked out too.
I mean, the obstacle, like, especially with like the process in the past, has been making sure that the way my contracts are put in place, like, it protects me as well. Because in the past, I've had them a little more open, a little more vague. But then I had people that would be like, oh yeah, like, I want the shoot, and like they have a set date, but I didn't take a deposit for it, and then like last minute, like, they back out. Or like I had a wedding who booked me, and she was like in the process of signing the contract, but I already set the date aside, and was talking to like a second shooter to get it all set up, because her wedding was coming up pretty quick, and then last minute she bailed. And luckily, like, well, there wasn't quite a contract in place with my second shooter yet, but it did kind of put me in an awkward position where now, like, I had this date set aside, I no longer have this business, but also now the second shooter had the date set aside, and I have to find a way to make sure it's good with them, or a way to cover them with money I didn't get from this wedding.
Of
So
course.
just making sure that from the legal side of it, that I'm protecting myself as well.
What was it, all trial and error? Like, how did you get more knowledge whenever it comes to legal, like making things more like a legal document? Because when it comes to me, I don't do that, but it bites me in the butt all the time, and that's one of the things that really discourages me a lot. I mean, it's, you say you're gonna do something, but then things happen, and I totally understand that, but it's just like, oh well, my
Like
hands
now,
are washed. I mean, I can't do it no more, but I agreed to do something, and now, and it ruins both parties, but one party takes the bigger hit instead of the
Yeah.
other one. So like, was it trial and error? Did you just look into more YouTube videos, like, or what what approach did you go? Because like if it was up to me, I wouldn't even know how to even write a legal document. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a proper one, but a good enough one. Like, what were your steps when?
So, I mean, I started out looking at YouTube, just kind of researching some
Okay.
things or researching through Google. But there are some different websites like Law Talk and stuff like that where they'll help write them out for you. Or the biggest change for me is when I started doing everything through HoneyBook,
Oh,
which
interesting. What is that?
it's like a platform that kind of connects my invoices, my galleries, like it's like a one-stop place where they can see each step of their like their session from like inquiry to planning, and they get to see their contract, and they actually have some contracts already set up
Okay.
on HoneyBook. So then I kind of tweak it, make sure it fits what like I need to cover and it fits my brand. And then I kind of move from there. But they're all like well written, like a lawyer looked at them. It's not like
Gotcha.
somebody was like, okay, like good luck, like this will keep you safe, kind of like. But I don't know. And as far as like learning, I needed to do this. There was like a long period of time where I wasn't doing it, and I realized that like this isn't working out for me because again, a lot of people were backing out, or I had a few like paid sessions where she was supposed to pay like the day of, and she's like, oh well, I'll pay you in the evening, and I was like, okay, but then she never paid me. So then I did this whole session, and I only got like half of my payment, and then she just backed out, and like I never saw her again.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I'm like, but like, I'm like it's fortunate that I at least got part of it, but I've now done all this work and had like a plan in place, like I had a budget in place, and like then it's gone.
Of course.
So it's just really a lot of me trying to be too nice, and then realizing nice isn't always the best way to run a business. Like you want to be polite, you want
Of
to be
course.
nice, but you also need to run yourself like a business and know when you're being taken advantage of.
Of course.
But also, the more I've done this, that like I have contracts in place and I lay it out in advance and kind of let people know like how everything works. The more I have clients that they don't want to do that, like they really like my work, they like the process, they understand what's going on, and they're completely down, and like oftentimes will want to pay even more. So it's kind of cool.
Interesting. Okay. So whenever you bring up the contracts, is it like? So before we even go any further, like this is like the thing that I will that this is my contract, or how do you go about it?
So I usually mention the contract when like they're talking about setting up their session, like
Okay.
we're choosing dates and everything, and then I let them know that it is like the 20% non-refundable retainer to officially book, which locks in their date and time, but it goes towards the cost of their session. It's not like the whole
Of course.
amount. And when I send their invoice, it'll have their contract as well. So we kind of mention it, and then they get a chance to look over and read it, ask any questions if they have it. And occasionally there'll be, a few things that they're like, okay, well, like, what does this mean? Or I do have it in there that I can use their images for, like, my social media, for my website. But for certain sensitive shoots, like I just did boudoir, like, sometimes they'll be like, okay, well, like, this says this. Is there a way we can, only do anonymous images? Or I would prefer you not show them, in which case I just kind of adjust it.
Okay. Interesting. You see, I would have never. It's not something that I would have thought about. What, even though like it's something I need. I think every photographer, especially if there's any hint of payment, I think it's super important to bring up a legal document, just to cover both parties. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
cover both parties, and to also let you know that, like, I am a reputable business. I'm not just somebody off the side of the street that was like, hey, like, I don't know you. Can I take a photo? Like, pay me.
No, I definitely agree. I I think being a photographer, sometimes it's hard to be a photographer. I mean, people just it's just a fact of just take a picture. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah,
It's very overlooked. It's like, and then the most awkward part is like, okay, it's gonna be this much. Well, eh, I'll find someone that does it cheaper. And it's just a hit to the gut whenever people approach you that way. What do you, not being a photographer, if you were to approach a photographer, now that you're a photographer, what is a good tip for people to handle that situation without insulting the photographer? Um, like if I need pictures taken, and I'm gonna pay whatever the photographer is because I'm going to them with a certain thing. But let's say I didn't want to pay. What's a good way to to decline it without insulting the photographer? Like, as for me, if someone was to say like, oh, like I know that it's too much for them, they'd be like, oh, like for me, if someone was to like decline, I would prefer someone just to say, oh, thank you, but I'm just, I think for me it's more the honesty part, like just completely just say, you know what, I think your price might be a little bit too high, and just leave it like that. And I'm like, okay, no, that's fine. Like,
Yeah, well, and I also think there's a difference between being like, oh, that's too expensive or your price is too high versus that's not what I have in my budget right now. So
gotcha.
I think a lot of people don't understand that as photographers, since so much goes into it, that, I mean, there is like a cost of doing business. Like, we don't get our prices out of thin air. Um, so to me, I think it's coming from a place of misunderstanding when somebody comes up and they're like, oh, that's, you know, you're way too expensive. Like, you wouldn't go to another business and be like, I guess you could, but like, it's less polite to like go somewhere else and tell them how like no, you're doing this wrong. Um, and especially knowing everything that goes behind it. Um, but yeah, so I feel like I kind of trailed off there, but
What is what what is what's been your biggest obstacle besides like the legal things, being a photographer? What's what's been the hardest thing for you?
well, I think again one of the hardest things for me is like there is such a stigma around the arts in general where a lot of people, and it's not just photographers, like it's, you know, painters or again makeup artists, people that do more creative things that take a lot of time and effort, and people not realizing what goes into it. So I get it all the time where people are like, oh, like when are you going to get a real job? Like my business
Of
isn't a
course.
real job. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that like you hear that enough, and part of you knows that like they just don't know what they're talking about, but there is a part of you that's like maybe I am doing something wrong. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of fighting through that.
Do you get a lot of those moments now? Like, do you question yourself, like, or am I doing the right thing? Am I chasing really what I want to do, or have you set in stone now, like this is really what I like doing and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, or until.
Yeah, I think as of this point in my life, like I've definitely come to a place where like I trust my process, I trust what I'm doing. Like I know I love photography. I love marketing and everything that goes into it. And so I do think that I'm in a good position. And now, when people come up to me like, oh, like you're not, you don't have a real job, and I'm like, well, I do have a real job. Like this is what I do. Like this is what I do throughout the day. And it's again, it goes back to people just not really understanding it. Um, and then I mean, I have people that like everyone's style is different. And so of course you're gonna have people that your style isn't quite their taste, and that's okay. Like that's perfectly fine. Find someone that fits your taste. But I think I've also gotten to a place where when people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, like this isn't for me," like it no longer feels like I'm being attacked. I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, like that's completely cool. Like, but before, like because the art is something that's so tied into who you are, like it's tied into like my identity.
Of course.
Um, that like when people don't appreciate it or they don't think it's like worthwhile doing, that a little part of you is like, well, that hurts. Like,
um have have you have you ever thought about quitting?
um, Not really, because again, it's something that I'm so passionate about that even if it gets to a point where I'm not comfortable doing it full time, like it's still something I'm always going to be doing. Um, it's just something I enjoy, and I like being able to connect to people in that way. Um, and I don't know, it's just something that feels like it's a part of me. So I don't think I could ever just let it go.
What's been if you could go back to your high school years as a newspaper and like start all over, what would be something you would redo and now you're like, oh, I would have done this different, or like I would have chosen this route, or like if someone that's trying to get into photography, what is the best advice you would give someone?
Just being confident in yourself, and no matter what stage you are.
Okay.
So just because you're new and you're still learning doesn't mean you're not a worthwhile artist. It just means you're still learning, and it's just I feel like as an artist or as a photographer, like there's always that learning process. Like even now, like I still have so much to learn and so much to improve on. But it's just knowing that to be confident that you will learn, and be confident in where you are for your skill level, if that makes sense.
Of course. What's the best way to gain confidence as a photographer, in
For
your opinion?
for me, it was just doing it all the time, just making sure that I'm practicing a lot, and that really helped my confidence, and kind of connecting me with other people um, that they became confident too. Like it kind of feeds in together. So
Would you suggest doing free photo shoots
to
starting off?
yeah, to start off, I definitely would suggest it. Just as a way to learn and to practice,
course.
because you can't just pick up something and know enough about it to get paid for it. There's usually so much that goes into it, and I do think you need to go through that process where you're learning your different techniques or your different editing style, or how to shoot in different lighting, and that it's a long process. Like it's not something you just snap into. So I definitely think starting out, there should be a certain level of like doing things for free or for trade.
Gotcha. What software do you use?
I use Photoshop.
Okay, strictly Photoshop, no
Yeah,
Lightroom.
just Photoshop.
And why is that?
It's just kind of what I grew up on. So it kind of actually goes back to being on the newspaper team, but that's what the software we used.
Okay.
And then from there, like in college, I used Photoshop, and then I just kind of stuck with it.
Have you ever messed around with Lightroom?
I actually haven't.
No.
Which I feel like I say that, and people are like, "Oh, she's crazy," but I've used Photoshop is what I'm comfortable with. Like I
Gotcha.
can do a lot with it, so I just kind of stick with it.
And what do you shoot with? And how much was it?
I shoot
How much have you spent, like, throughout the whole process? Just to give people more of an idea of like
man,
how expensive it really is.
man, I don't even know, because it's stuff that I've acquired over like 8 or 10 years, that like
course.
it's hard to like put a dollar amount on it. But for instance, my camera was originally, I think it was originally $3,000.
Okay, and what do you shoot with?
I shoot with a Nikon D7000,
Okay.
and then I have a lens that was like 500, another lens that was 800. I just have a few lenses at the moment,
Of course.
but and then with like lighting and reflectors, and I actually spend a lot on props as well, because I'll use like different like backdrops, or I use a lot of flowers or natural plants in my shoot.
Gotcha.
So that's all stuff that like I'm getting the day beforehand, and I mean, just all these little things, they do kind of add up. But I don't know if I could put an actual dollar amount on it.
That makes sense. Do you prefer natural light or
Yeah.
studio work?
I definitely prefer natural
Have
light.
you done studio? Let's start with that
I-
question.
I've done a little bit, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
It is something I do want to learn more on, and I actually recently got a studio set up so I can kind of practice with it a little bit.
Congrats. What did you get?
It was actually a gift, so I don't remember I don't remember where it came from.
What was it?
but
No. What was it? Like lights, or was it like a backdrop? What did
It's
you
like
get?
a backdrop light set.
Okay.
And then I had like some, extra reflectors and like a green screen and like,
Interesting.
all sorts of extra goodies. But yeah, I definitely want to learn more with that. But so far, even when I have used the backdrop, I still tend to use it in like a natural light setting. So I really need to like pull out the lights and actually like, play around with those. And that's definitely on my list of things to learn. But there's something about natural light and
Okay.
like kind of working with it. Like you have to know how to shoot in harsh light or soft light or, when it's overcast. Like there's something about that I just really enjoy. And then I also love being outside. I love being in nature. So anytime I can kind of combine those things, I'm like,
So
that's where it's
when
at. Yeah.
so whenever it came to like learning about light, what was it, more YouTube or was it just practicing?
I would say a good like 80% of it. Well, actually, that's hard. A good like 60% was YouTube.
Really interesting.
Like
Okay.
I actually did learn a lot from YouTube or like following like certain artists that I really like their style of work
Okay.
and being more of a shy person, like seeing behind the scenes how they talk to their clients, and I'm like, oh, okay, like so when I say this, that isn't weird. Like it's just kind of like creating my own confidence by like learning through what I like in other people.
Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah.
How were you able to overcome that shyness? Do you shoot with more girls or guys?
I tend to shoot with more girls.
Okay.
And I think sometimes that, I mean, just being more confident in general has helped me. I'm now at a place where like I can comfortably reach out to people I've never met before and
Okay.
just show up and like be able to have a full conversation and not
Gotcha.
feel like I'm forcing something. Um, and I think it does help with a lot of the models or the clients I have shot with, being female. Like I don't know, I feel like I can connect to them a little bit more.
Gotcha.
Not that I couldn't connect to like a male model
Of
or
course.
whatever, but it just feels they're like,
More comfortable.
yeah, a little more comfortable. And then they compliment like, oh, like I love your hair, and I'm like, oh, like I love your tattoos, and it's just like a normal like a normal conversation. Whereas I feel like I don't know.
Um, when you first started taking photos, because I remember when I first started taking photos, just talking, just like trying to have a conversation with the person that I was shooting at. I could probably say that sometimes some shoots I just stayed quiet and I didn't know how to direct someone. I didn't know how to have a conversation just because I was super shy. I myself am super shy and like such an introverter that it was a complete change when I started taking photos. I mean, you're required to talk, you're required to compliment a person, you're required to adjust, say, you know what, I think this post might look better this way. Like how how were you able to manage those things when you first started taking pictures? How were you able to manage posing people? Because I think that's one of the hardest things is to adjust someone or just tell them, you know what, like, can you do this? Can you do this? Like, how were you able to do it being a shy person?
Yeah. Well, when I first started out, there definitely was a period of time where it was really hard for me to direct people. But again, the more confidence I got, the more I knew what I was doing.
Okay.
And a matter of directing people in a way that's positive versus negative. Like, you never want to be like, ooh, that doesn't look good. Like, you always want to be like, oh, like, that looks great, but it would look a little better. Like, if you roll the shoulder back, or like if you, moved your leg in this way. And then also a lot of it now is me showing them how it's done.
Interesting. Okay.
So I kind of like to demonstrate a little more, especially with shoots that like they've never been in front of a camera, so
Gotcha.
they get really nervous. And it's just sometimes it's cool to like show them a picture, or to be like, you stand there in a certain way and be like, okay, like kind of do what I'm doing, and then from there I'll actually have them do things that are like natural movements. So I could be like, okay, now like walk towards me and like kind of do things where they're not so much thinking about posing or about being in front of a camera, but like, you know, like twirling and like, you know, just things that like could feel natural. I'm like, okay, like you're reading a book, like, and I'll usually have things that they're doing like different prompts as well, so it's not as awkward.
Gotcha.
And then of course it is a lot of like complimenting and like when something's really working, being like, ooh, this is amazing, like, and then kind of showing them from the back of the camera so they can see like, ooh, like I do look good. And then you feel a lot less awkward when you're like, I don't know if this is even coming out good, and then they see it and they realize it is, and then their confidence goes up and they feel, you know, definitely like, oh, okay, like she's asking me to do some like kind of weird things, but it's working and these look awesome, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
I definitely agree. What has been the most awkward part of being a photographer, like from your experience? What's been the most awkward, and what is your favorite part?
Um, I feel like I don't know. That's kind of a hard question. One of the most awkward things for me in the past has been like first approaching someone for a photo
Okay.
shoot. Like sometimes that first meeting, you don't know what to expect. Um, and a lot of that, like once I know more about like my business flow, or the questions that I want to ask them, the things that I want to know, and the things they might want to know, the more comfortable I am kind of initiating those conversations. And I like to ask people like specific things about themselves, like where'd you grow up, and like stuff that you can kind of connect with them later on. So like, but initially it was really awkward for me to be like, okay, like I know you just came to me wanting to shoot, but also like, tell me about who you are, like what'd you do this weekend, like, you know, just like where'd you grow up, and like just different information. And I feel like sometimes people really connect with that, and other times they're like, why are you asking me, like I just want to know how much your photo shoot costs. Like, why are you asking me all this information? But and I think like the more I do that, like the more you find those clients that truly connect with who you as a person, um, and the more that they connect with you, the better experience they're going to have as well. So you know, just kind of getting to know them and sharing information about me too. But
And what's the thing that really gets you excited, or really, what's your favorite part about taking photos and photography in general?
um, my favorite part would be when you show them the image, and especially somebody who didn't think that, you know, that this is something that they could do, or like they feel really awkward about it, or they're not necessarily the most confident person themselves, showing them an image and them seeing like, oh my goodness, that is me, like I love this, and seeing themselves in a different way. So that's one of my favorite.
And 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 how did you first approach someone, like, because I think that is, for me personally, super hard to do. Like, when I first started taking photos, like, I remember sending a bunch of messages to a bunch of people and just saying, oh, like, hey, my name's Abisai, like, I'm trying to be a photographer, like, can we shoot? Like how was your approach, and how has it differ, like how has it changed, like throughout from when you first started to now, like what has, because I think personally, or mainly like for like male photographers, I think it's a little bit harder, like approaching, like, you know, like people and telling them, oh, you know what, like I'm a photographer, like, and can we take some pictures? I mean, when you clearly, especially when you're starting off, because you have no portfolio
Yeah,
whatsoever.
nothing for them to look at, and they're like, who is this guy? Like,
Exactly. And I'm sure, like, whenever you reach out to someone, or like someone like DMs you, like just randomly, like you obviously go to their page and you check who they are, and like
yeah,
you
make sure they're a real person. And
exactly. And like starting off like as a photographer, like it could be very scary. I mean, you want practice as much as possible, so that means shooting as much as possible. But sometimes if you're insecure, if you don't have confidence in yourself, and obviously you're not going to have confidence in your work because you're barely starting off, so there's nothing to base that confidence off of. Because now that I have a little bit more experience, I'm able to say like this is like the photos I've taken, and this is my vision for the next photo, and this is what I want to create, and I have my photos to as proof. So like for someone starting off, whether it be a guy or a girl, um, what is, now that you have experience reaching out to people, what is the best way of approaching that awkward situation? Because I personally think it's super awkward just messaging people, and then not only that, but also getting a lot of no's. Like what is something to help you build up on that? No, I mean, for me, I remember when I first started taking pictures, I would get an answer back, and I wouldn't open that message because I knew I reached out to that certain person, and I didn't want to know the answer. So I probably,
Yeah, you're like, well, we're in this limbo. Like, it could go either way. I'll look at it tomorrow. Like.
Exactly, and I probably didn't touch that message for almost a week because I didn't want to open it because I was too afraid of it being a no, and I'm like, oh crap, like, but how would you approach that? How can someone starting off taking photos, being a photographer, how can they approach that situation, and what is the best way from a girl's point of view also to reach out to someone and ask, hey, do you want to take some photos?
Yeah, well, originally when I started, it was a lot of like, I would say start with people you know.
Okay.
So if there's people
Interesting. Good
like
idea.
friends or family that are comfortable, like.
But what if there's no one?
If there's absolutely no one,
Yeah.
then you are gonna have to go ask people. But the way I started out, like aside from family and friends, once I've kind of built that a little bit, I did a lot through Instagram, but where you would go and you see like a model or a girl or a guy that you really like their work, you like their how they style their outfits, and maybe they're not a professional model, and especially starting out, like you never want to go to like some signed model who really knows what she's doing and be like, hey, like I don't know what I'm doing, do you want to like figure it out? Because I mean, she's also spent a lot of time like honing her craft,
yeah.
so kind of have to respect that. But starting out, I would just see like somebody, I'm like, oh, like I could be friends with this person, and then just reaching out, and you do kind of have to anticipate you are going to get a lot of no's. You just kind of have to, like, it sucks, but you have to be prepared for the rejection because it will happen. Like there's going to be a lot of people that are like, I don't know, this seems a little like it's
sketchy.
a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I want to do this with this person, and then like a lot of my locations tend to be like random parks outdoors, and
Interesting.
like it's stuff that like you see that and you're like, okay, like this could be fun, or I could get kidnapped. Like,
of course.
So
you bring up a valid point, but now as a girl, how would you direct a guy photographer to do that? Like you just said, you like shooting in random places, like random parks or like different situations that if it's a guy, you know what I mean, like, and you were to approach or like message a girl and say, you know what, I want to shoot at this park, and you're like, oh, that's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
like,
you're like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like.
So what do you think is the best approach for them to find? Because when I started shooting downtown, you know what I mean, I like parks and things like this because of nature, of the grass and stuff like that. But I knew that going in, like I knew that I try to put myself in a girl's perspective.
Yeah, it's
like,
all about making them feel safe as well.
Exactly. So I would always try to choose downtown. You know what I mean? Downtown, like let's meet up downtown, let's shoot downtown, let's try to do some stuff downtown. What would be your approach to someone that, especially a guy that's trying to start off as a photographer, to make the girl feel more comfortable in the shoot?
I think a lot of it's how you approach them initially. So just making sure that it's a very respectful conversation, and that you address maybe some of the things that might make them uncomfortable. Be like, okay, like understanding I don't really have a portfolio. Like maybe don't be like, hey, I don't have a portfolio, but be like,
but what if they ask?
But then maybe mention that you are just starting out. But also, again, like especially starting out, I think it is important to shoot in locations where it won't just be like two people, and
Gotcha.
it is a little more public, a little more safe, because that'll make them feel safe as
Of
well.
course.
And maybe finding like a little slice of this public area that has fewer people, so
Gotcha.
they're comfortable being in front of the camera, but also comfortable knowing that they are in a space that's protected. So I think a lot of it is that, and also meeting with them in person prior to the shoot definitely
Really interesting. Okay.
because then they get to see you. They're like, okay, like, because I feel like when you see someone on social media, like, they're not always that person.
Of course.
And especially with how crazy the world is, you might see that and be like, okay, well, like, is this them, or like, are
Gotcha.
they completely different? Is it a different person gonna show up? Like, and
Very
also what I remind them as well is make sure they bring a guest with them.
Okay.
So I'm all about safety buddies.
Okay.
For any shoot, I will never tell you you can't bring
Of course.
someone. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. I don't care like what's going on. Like, if you want to bring someone, let's go.
Of course.
And then I'll also let them know how many people I'm bringing with me. Like, if I'm bringing an assistant, I'll be like, okay, and I'll have my assistant like name them.
Okay.
Just so they know exactly who's going to be there. They feel more comfortable. They don't
Interesting.
show up and there's like 5 people staring at them
Of course.
that they've never met before.
Of course.
And I think what also helps, even just starting out, is having a lot of images of you on your page. So
True. Yeah.
when they see you, they can connect with who you are, and again through your writing. But they also know that when you show up and they see that it is you, like, it's definitely a more comfortable experience.
That makes perfect sense. How would you direct someone a model that's super shy? How can you make them feel more comfortable in your situation? How do you make someone like that's never done it before? And being in front of a camera is super scary. Like, I personally hate being in front of the camera. So if like someone's trying to, even though I know how to pose someone and someone's all like, "Oh, let me take pictures of you," I really wouldn't know what to do, and I would
Yeah, you're like, what do I do with my hair?
be super awkward. So how can you direct someone or someone that's trying to become a model? What are some tips you could give them, like if like this is gonna be like the first shoot or they're trying to contact? Well, let's first start with like how can you approach that awkwardness situation? How can you make someone feel more comfortable
Yeah, well,
in
I
front of
think
the
that
camera?
a lot of it is like getting them to not think about that they're doing a photo shoot, like getting
Okay.
them to talk about themselves, or getting to talk about like just different situations, so they're not focused on like, hey, she has a camera and it's like 5 inches from my face, what do I do? And just making them feel more comfortable in that way. And I'll do a lot of props again, where I'll have you do like like a different walk, or like if it's couples, like we'll do like piggyback rides and stuff,
Interesting,
just to
okay.
kind of get them loosened up and to think more about having a fun experience and being less anxious than if we just started off and like I didn't really say anything and I just
So
yeah. And I think sometimes it helps as well with people that have never done it before, not being so in their face with it. Like, I'll put on a lens that I could shoot from further away, and then I'll be like, okay, like, don't focus on me as much. I'm gonna just be over here like 10 feet away, like, you do your thing, and then I'll kind of direct them from there. And again, a lot of it is kind of showing them how to do the pose.
okay.
Or like if you're telling them something, instead of being like, okay, like move your arm like to the left, just like kind of show them how you want them to move it. And I think a lot of people feel more comfortable with that as well. But the main point I would say would just be to get them talking about something other than the photo shoot.
Gotcha. Just get them distracted and focus
Yeah.
on something else. And for someone that's trying to become a model or trying to work with photographers, how would you approach that? How can someone approach it? Personally, a lot of people have asked me they want photos, right? And they really don't want to pay. And for me, it's always been like, that's fine, but I feel more comfortable if someone's all like, you know what, I just can't afford to pay you right now, but can we do something for free? Or is there any way I like, what can I, when they're more like, I just can't afford to pay you, like, and they're like, can we shoot for free? Just being direct to me, and they're like, I really like your work. I mean, just butter me up, right? Like, I really like your work. Like, can we take some photos? But unfortunately, I can't pay you. Or they might say, you know what, I have $20. I'll pay you $20. Or I'll pay you 40. This is all I have, and it's all I could afford. Compared to someone approaching me and they're like, let's collab, but when we get there, it's all about, well, this is all I want, and after you shoot all they want, they're like, okay, well, it's time to go in. Just feels like you got taken advantage of, because instead of someone just saying, you know what, instead of them giving you the power to decide, okay, yes, I'll work with you knowing that I'm not going to get paid, compared to let's collab, and then you're expecting a collaboration where that person gets photos they wanted, and then you also come with a mindset that, you know what, I want these kind of photos as well, but at the end of the shoot it just becomes a one-way party. How can someone approach that situation in for you, like someone that's barely starting off? 'Cause there's a lot of people that reach out to me, and well, not a lot, but there's people that reach out to me, and some of them approach me in a good way, like, oh, you know what, I can't afford to pay you, can we do this for free? Or someone's all like, well, can you just shoot me, like, can we just work? But I'm like, okay, that's not really how you approach something, especially if you're gonna get something done, especially if you're expecting something for free. Like, how can someone approach you,
Yeah, I will say it is a little
or
bit
a
of,
photographer, just a photographer in general? Like,
yeah.
how can they?
Like, I will say it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when somebody comes up and they have a concept that they're expecting me to shoot for free.
Okay.
Um, and so even when I do collabs, we'll really kind of discuss all of that up front before I like decide 100%, like, yeah, like I'll go ahead and do this.
Interesting. Okay.
Just to make sure it does end up benefiting both of us. Because I've definitely been in those situations where you're excited to work with someone, but then they have such specific ideas and it
Of
doesn't
course.
fit your brand or your style. And then I end up doing it anyways, and I realize, like, I can't really use these images, or they decide that they want to do something else with them, or like they decide, like, oh, I don't want you to actually post any of those. Whether like they've wanted it for like a specific purpose that they didn't tell me about. And
Interesting.
so I definitely beforehand will get all that information and we'll kind of work on an idea and make sure it is someone that I feel comfortable working with, and I think that I can help them and they can help me. As far as people that would approach and maybe not be able to pay, I don't do those as much anymore, simply because I do have bills, like
Of course.
and it does take a lot of time, effort, and money when I do my collabs. Like, it's never oh yeah, let's just show up at this park and wing it. It's always like, okay, like we have this specific outfit, I'll bring these specific things, and then I take time ahead of it to kind of map out like what kind of emotion I want to go for, what kind of poses, that kind of thing. If I need like specific prompts for that. So a lot goes into each and every one. I will say if it is like a special circumstance, like there have been times where like it's something that it's just a really good cause, then I'll kind of reach out and be like, oh yeah, like let's do this. It's okay. Like, you don't need to pay me, kind of thing. But a lot of times with people that are just starting out, I'll probably direct them to some other photographers I know that might be comfortable doing a trade in that way. And maybe some photographers that have just started out, so they can kind of learn together, versus going to someone and just hoping you can get it for free. Because
Gotcha.
I do understand sometimes it's hard, like,
Of course.
to not have the funds. But I do, when I have done that in the past, I've run into people, they're like, oh no, can we do it, for $20 because it's all I have. And then they want, very specific things, so they end up wanting more, or they end up like turning around and like buying a shoot from like someone else I know, like for full cost. And it's just kind of like, okay, well, did you really not have it, or were you just trying to get a deal? So it's just kind of learning that nice isn't always the best,
Sure.
again, but kind of finding that balance.
Of course. Interesting. Just to finish things off, what what can someone do to what how can what can what needs how can I say this? What is something that could help you out, whether it be like getting help from someone else or you just learning by yourself? Like, what is something to help you push? What can what needs to happen to push you to the next level for you to say, you know what? Because I feel like we all have levels, right? Where like first started doing shoots for free, so that's cool. Like, you know what? Then I went to the level like charging, and then now I'm charging. Now, what's your next level when it comes to like your business, and what well, like for me, like I've always wanted to do editorial shoots. So like for me, like my first level was getting enough people to shoot with me so that way I could even get good at it. And then like my next level would be, you know what, like getting someone to pay for it. And my third level would be um doing some editorial shoots for a magazine. And then like my next step would be like see my work in New York, you know what I mean? Like in a billboard for Dior or like Chanel. Like those are my steps and what I would want to achieve in photography. What is yours, and what's stopping you from going to the next level? And what is your next level? And what could happen? Like how can someone help you, or like what do you need to do in order for you to achieve your next level?
Yeah. Well, my next level from here would be getting to connect or to work with people that are more outside of San Antonio, outside of Texas.
Okay.
Um, so people from different states or from different countries. That's kind of where I would like to head with it. Um,
So like working with clientele from other like states and countries then.
yeah, that way I get to, because I would love to travel more, and I would love to have them go both hand in hand, and create beautiful images and locations that, not everyone gets to shoot at, or it's not expected, or I love going to national parks, so I do have a goal of shooting at every national park
Interesting.
eventually.
Okay.
So I would like to kind of connect some of those things and create some like breathtaking work with clients of different, cities and countries, kind of getting to see more.
Okay. And like right now, what would you say it's stopping you from actually doing that besides COVID? Like, is there a way to work around it, or what's stopping you from actually saying, you know what, like messaging someone like close to the nearest like state park and saying, you know what, like, would you like to work, or like, what's your biggest obstacle at the moment?
At the moment, it would be kind of balancing growing my business here, and making it to where I can support going out to different locations, because there is a lot of cost that goes in with travel, and then kind of connecting with people that are far away from you is a little more difficult to find someone that like, okay, like I want to work with you, I trust working with you, and you trust working with me. And then a lot of people will tend to shoot with people that are local to them.
Okay.
So just finding a way to make those connections with people that are further away.
Do you reach out to people often, or like do you try to build a community, not a community, but do you try to make friends with like other photographers, or like, or stuff like that, or do you just stay like in your own bubble and just worry about your own photography and stuff like that?
No, I definitely have a lot of photographer
Okay.
friends, and I think that helps too, because y'all can kind of grow and learn from each
Gotcha.
other. Most of them are also a little more local, but that would also probably be a good idea, is reaching out to other photographers and, different cities and countries as well. It's actually a good idea. But I do think it's always good to have like a group of like-minded
Of
people
course.
where you can kind of learn from, and kind of see things from different perspectives as well.
Interesting. Is there anything you want to finish off with? Do you want to plug anything, like your social medias, and
Not
how
really.
can?
I mean, I just have my Instagram that
Okay.
it tends to be the biggest for me, but sunflower stills.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.